We are so glad to have you tuned in to the Pulse WV Live, a network that beats to the heart of God. I'm your host, John Fowler, along with Pastor Jay Mace, today from the Winfield campus of the Pulse, and we're so glad to have you tuned in to this day. We are excited because we're in the middle of getting ready to launch our 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week radio station, and we will be posting the app real soon for you to download from Apple and what's that other phone that people use?
Android.
Yeah, flip that switch on there. Android, yeah. So the Android's already set up, but you have the Android, and we're just waiting on the Apple to be set up and ready to go. So we are really excited. And you know, Pastor Jay, and you know this as well as I do, we've known each other for over 30 plus years, back before Christy and I were even married. Mm-hmm. And we've been married 34 years. And so we went to, if you remember right, we went to Lamaze together with our wives, including Tim Morse. I'm surprised we all didn't get thrown out.
I'm glad you clarified that we went with our wives,
this
so they didn't think it was just me and you.
This day and time. Breathe, Jay, breathe. And, of course, you all bailed out early because Luke arrived early.
Yeah, Sam was put on bed rest, and,
And then we had then Tim, then Kaylee showed up, and then John Christopher was last out of that the week before Christmas. And so, but we all did that together. And I said that to say this. I remember you and me sitting on a bus along with Christy. You know, Christy was on there that time too, and we were going local to a gospel sing. I was playing bass for the Lordsmen. Mm-hmm. You were friends with Ray and the family.
Yep.
And we were so young.
We were.
I think that was before you even went to the Marines. Yeah, you weren't
Probably.
even. Yeah, you weren't.
Yeah, because I did it backwards. I went to 2 years of college, then went in the Marines.
Oh, okay.
And then came back and finished.
And so we're sitting, and especially you and Christy in these deep conversations years ago. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and then, you know, we have this ministry that we are a part of.
Yeah.
And
those were stepping stones to it, and we never knew it. Never had a clue.
Never had a clue. Yeah. And something else is my background was radio. Mm-hmm. Christy's background, radio.
Well, and I DJ'd.
You DJ'd?
When I was at UK.
Oh, and you got
campus radio.
Plus we got Bopper.
Yeah.
Plus we got John Sandy. You know, John Sandy, that's how I met John Sandy, was in radio.
Yeah.
And then he introduced me to James Ashworth, and James Ashworth mentored me for years and changed my life.
Yep.
And so I guess I'm saying all this to say this is that you may think you're out on an island somewhere by yourself, but you're really not, because God will center people around you that may be the ones that will work with you in the future, 30 years down the road.
Yeah.
You never know. So, I mean, you stop and think. You've pastored country churches. I've pastored country churches. You know, we're more edgy now, and, you know, with the Pulse Church, and having more fun than probably, this is kind of like my wheelhouse. And you're an awesome pastor, and you do great things, and God's faithful in your preaching. And so it's just really exciting. And no wonder the devil hates us. You know,
well, we don't give him any rest.
No.
Yeah, and no intention to either.
You know, these people who say they suffer from panic attacks, Satan is a full-fledged panic attack all day.
Yeah.
And so, and if I heard Jonathan Shuttlesworth say one day, he said, whatever drives the devil mad, do it twice as much.
Yeah.
You know, and I like that. I thought, man, that is really good. But I'm excited.
Yeah, talking about that, I know we wanted to get into last week's message, but talking about that, I found, I'm going to find it here so I read it properly and not butcher it by trying to remember it. I found this on, I don't know, Twitter.
So what you sent me
Facebook
yesterday?
Or something, yeah.
I love it.
And I just thought it was phenomenal, and I love the way I love quotes. If you know me, you know I love quotes, and I have stickums of things all over the place until I memorize it. But it says, if you minister from your flesh, you will never reach someone's spirit. And isn't that ultimately what we're called to do? Yeah. And I don't think I've ever heard someone say it in that context before. You know, I've heard people say, your soul needs Jesus and things like that. But as ministers, right, we're called to be ministers of reconciliation, right? That's scripture. And who are we reconciling? Of course, we're trying to reconcile man, but ultimately we're trying to reconcile man to God.
Right.
Right? So it means that we have to appeal to them on a spiritual level.
That's good.
For them to grasp spiritual things, and for them to grasp God and his love for them. You know, man can't be saved unless they are drawn of what? The Spirit.
Spirit, yeah.
You know, God's Spirit and their spirit have to have a moment. And so I love that. If you minister from your flesh, you will never reach someone's spirit. Until you allow God to break you, flesh will strive to change flesh. And it goes on to say, brokenness before God and brokenness for those who are hurting. Allow God's Spirit to come upon you for service, and then he gets all of the glory.
Amen.
Right? And I think, and people think, I've been called jealous and all kinds of stupid things because I say things like this. But I think we live in this day and age where we tell good people
Right.
to go to seminary, to learn how to be a preacher.
Right.
Right? And they go and they, quote unquote, learn how to be a preacher.
Right.
But maybe have never been called.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And this comes up in everything lately. But to come after me, to follow after me, to do what I do. Deny yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Crush yourself.
Yes.
Right? And take up death. We talked about this last week. Yeah. Take up death. Take up your cross. The cross was known as a symbol of death. And take up your cross and follow me.
Right.
And so I just randomly ran across this, and I'm not on Facebook nearly as much. If I'm on Facebook, I'm either posting something about Jesus, something about coffee, or something about my family, or something that I think is hilariously funny that nobody laughs at. So that's pretty much what you get from me on Facebook. And
I'm just posting sermons and music and all this other stuff.
So I don't know if it was Facebook or I don't know if it's Twitter, because I do follow some people on Twitter and different things, and because I find my way to good things that way. And social media is what you make it. If you want to make it garbage, it'll be garbage. If you want to make it good and only follow and see good stuff, you can absolutely control that. But I came across that yesterday, and I was just like, man, that's phenomenal. That's a phenomenal quote right there that we all need to keep in perspective. So,
do you think that somebody, one of the topics that you had talked about in your sermon on Sunday, and I just sat there and wrote it down, and then I looked at it. Struggling with sin means that you have all the world that you want. And I thought about that. Now, you didn't say it like that.
Okay, I was trying to remember.
Yeah,
okay.
you didn't say it like that. But you said struggling with sin, and then I wrote down means that you have all the world that you want. And I thought about that. I thought, wow, how that is. And people are constantly, and you'll hear this as well as I do. They'll say, how you doing today? Yeah. Oh, I'm just struggling. Struggling. And in life, sure you can. And I don't want to belittle or say that, you're not saved if you struggle, or everyone's dealing with something. Within their life. But is there a place that you can get to where there's very little struggle? I think it goes back to dying. The more we die,
and I think that's the key.
And I'll be right back. But I feel left out here, so I'll be right back. You keep talking. I'll be right back. Just 1 minute.
Okay.
Yeah, I just feel kind of left out.
Kind of left. Oh, I know what you're gonna do. Okay. So Yeah, he kind of freaked me out, everyone. Hey, hi, everyone. Sorry, he kind of freaked me out when he left because I don't know how to control any of this stuff. But, yeah, I think we can reach a place where we're not emotionally and mentally tapped into the struggle. And, to where we're abiding spiritually, and much better, where we're abiding spiritually and being drawn into a realm where we're thinking on Jesus, where we're thinking on ministry, where we're thinking on, how to best deliver people from their struggle, right? And I think it is every bit of that crushing, because if we're not crushed, right, if we haven't come to that place, and for some people to get crushed, man, you got to go through the hounds of hell to get crushed and everything else, because you hold on so much to the flesh. And, for me, that was kind of what this was all about. And I don't think I've had nearly the emotional and mental struggle that a lot of people have, simply because I knew I grew up in it, right? I grew up in church. I was one of those kids that I was there every single time that the doors were open, no matter what the service was. I was drugged to it, and I was there, and I'm thankful for it. I wasn't necessarily thankful for it at the time, but I'm thankful for it now. And I'm thankful for people today that have the diligence to put church and to put the fervor of God, because you think, oh, it's just church. It's just going to be a boring service, or it's just going to be another youth service, or it's just going to be this or that and the other. No. You're looking at it entirely wrong. And you're letting your kids look at it entirely wrong. Because when you walk into the house of God, you're allowing His fervor and His Spirit and His drawing to do work. Mm-hmm. Will it do work that night? Maybe. Will it do work that day? Maybe. Right? But it might be 10 years from now that a seed is planted that is used to draw your home, to draw your friend, to draw your kid, to draw yourself out of a pit. Mm-hmm. And if you're not subject to that now, then it's not gonna take root in you later. And so I was one of those kids. So I knew what this was, and I was clearly called to it. I was in boot camp at Paris Island, right? And I say this all the time, but I mean it. It's not just a ritual saying for me. I really mean this. I was in Paris Island Marine Corps boot camp, and I was waking up dreaming of being in the pulpit, wow, preaching. Mm-hmm. And, you don't get a whole lot of rest there anyway, right? Mental, physical, anything. And then to be dreaming of preaching and waking up in that, God, I don't have time to deal with this right now, kind of place. And so forth. That's where He called me to preach. Right. Was in boot camp. Well, what was happening to me in boot camp? I was getting crushed. Yeah. Everything about who Jay was, and everything that Jay wanted, and everything that that Jay had created, and everything that was Jay was getting stripped down, literally stripped down and crushed. All right. And I honestly believe that had I not gone to boot camp and been in that place where I had nothing, I had no one except a few jerks yelling at me all day, every day, right? And you don't really create friendships in boot camp, at least not where I was. I mean, maybe it's changed today. That was 30 plus years ago. But you don't create friends in boot camp. I created my Marine Corps friends after boot camp. But I'm not in contact with anybody I was in boot camp with. And, I was getting crushed. I was being put on that island where all I really had was God and a few letters from home. Right. That was it. And so I was more focused on God helping me get through it than I ever was. And this is when He began speaking to me.
So you were at a good place spiritually when you were in boot camp?
No, I wasn't. I'd rededicated my life. Oh, okay. But I didn't have it all together. by no means, right? I was, you know, I rededicated my life about 2 weeks before I left and went, because I knew I needed Jesus at boot camp, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where it was. I'm not even sure that it was a spiritual awakening for me at that moment. It was just a realization of, I'm going to need Jesus. I better fix all this.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that the redemption wasn't real. I'm just saying that I didn't have my head right yet.
Okay.
And, you know, so God put me in a place, and you can say, well, God didn't do that, you did that. Well, however it worked out, God took advantage of that place to begin to show me what his plan was.
Right.
Right? And I was subject to him. I was in a place where I needed his help.
All right.
So what scared me to death? No way. I'm not going to be that guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and the thing about boot camp, they strip you down and then they build you up,
Mm-hmm.
you know, into this overbearingly cocky, you know, I can
you.
take on the world. It's not so much that it's about you, but it's just, you know, you don't want someone in battle who, you know, who isn't confident.
Has a self-confidence issue.
Right. And our senior drill instructor told us, I know we're getting way off topic, but my senior drill instructor told us early on, he said, you guys that don't have a little bit of it in you, he said, you need to belly up to the people that do, because you're not going to make it. You're not going to walk off my island.
Wow.
And so forth, because, you know, I don't want someone that's second-guessing themselves in the foxhole.
Right.
And from this day forward, you always need to figure out who belongs in your foxhole and who doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I evaluate. Man, you know, and portraying that to ministry, you know, it's kind of like, man, do I really want that guy in my foxhole?
All right.
You know, when
it's a battle.
when push comes to shove, man, dude, is that somebody I can depend on to hold their I'll hold my ground.
Right.
But are they going to hold their ground?
Right.
You know, and you know, so there's all of that going on. But anyway, getting back to the point, I was subject to God, and God was able to speak to me and get my attention. Well, I ran from it. I was like, absolutely no way, God. I will go to church. I'll be the guy that shows up for work party. I'll be that guy, but I'm not going to be that guy, right? And just again, I'd wake up preaching. I'd wake up preaching. I'd wake up preaching again and again and again and again. And you know, I communicated it with a couple people. And, you know, immediately they responded, I always knew God had a call on your life. I'm like, you're not helping here. and all of these things. And so I came to this place where I got off active duty and I was back home. And it was real. And I had to do something about it. I mean, it was easy to hide while I was in the military,
Right.
you know, because I had a lot of things going on, a lot of places to go and everything else. And so I hid. And I got introduced to a lot of stuff that I'd never really been introduced to in life, because I lived in a really good spiritual family. And so I was just not around a lot of stuff.
How long were you in the military?
For 4 years.
4 years.
And then came out in the reserves. But you know, so it was easy for me to hide from what God was doing in my life in all of those environments, right? And, you know, it's like I always knew. And so I really came to this place was I'm going to make him change his mind, right? And so I dove into sin with everything in me. And, you know, drugs is about the only thing I didn't do, right? But I dove into sin because I felt like I could disqualify myself and God wouldn't want me. But what I found out through all of it, and this gets back to your question,
Sure.
What I found out through all of that was when I was crushed and I was broken, and inside I was just a crumbling human being, because I knew who I was. God had showed me who I was. I knew who I was. I knew who I was meant to be.
All right.
But the flesh didn't want it.
Mm-hmm.
And I I had to figure that out. So when I fell on my knees at my bedside and I prayed, in that prayer, I knew it all ends here. The sex, the alcohol, the attitude, the fighting, the mindset, all of the things I've made myself to be to run away from this. It all has to end here. Jay has to die. It has to end here, because I can't carry that into what you're asking me to do, and do it well. And you know, that teaching, that comes from growing up in it, right? That wasn't just a momentary, all of a sudden I got this figured out thing. No, I had grown up in it and knew what it meant. And so at that moment at my bedside, I was determined. God, if you want me to preach, it was a silent prayer. Let someone ask me to preach. You know the story. William Lane asked me like 3 days later to preach the next Sunday night. Like, are you kidding me? No one heard that prayer, and literally you give me 3 days. What happened on third day?
And William Lane lived it.
Yeah. And what happened third day?
What, all third day?
What happened third day? Stone was rolled away.
Stone was rolled
away.
Yeah.
And so symbolic to my life, stone was rolled away. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Jay has to die. And so I think through God's power, not my power, through God's power in that moment, I was able to say, it all ends here.
Wow.
It all ends here. John, I was determined I would never marry. You know, the things I had done for the last 4 years, I didn't deserve a wife, right? And I was determined I would never marry. It was all about Jesus for me from that point forward. Everything I would go to do, nope, that's not edifying. Nope, that doesn't glorify God. Wow. I mean, that was the mindset of my life at that time. So getting back to your question, I don't think I have the emotional and mental struggle that a lot of people in ministry do today, because I've persecuted the flesh. I'm not saying I'm perfect.
No, I understand what you mean.
I'm not saying
you
I'm
died
perfect,
out to that.
but I died out to the desires.
Right.
And I have this mindset that when something creeps out, you know, whether it creeps out of my mouth or whatever, and I mean, I don't practice sin. I don't. If you don't believe me, live with me, walk with me for a few days. I don't practice sin. I'm not perfect. I accidentally do things, and I'm like, oh, that probably wasn't the most glorifying thing I can do. I've got to fix that. Right. And I'm very focused on crushing myself. I'm very focused on denying myself. I'm very focused on not making this about me. So much to the point I won't even let put my name on church signs. Yeah. And everything else. I pastored.
I like that too.
I pastored down in Polka, and someone said, "Hey, come and look," and everything else. I was like, "What?" He said, "I just want to show you what I did." Well, they made a new church sign, and I bless their heart. I love their heart. I love the reason for doing everything else. And real big at the bottom, Pastor J. Mace. I'm just like, don't like that. I don't want this to ever be about me.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And, you know, because I want to stay crushed. I want to, you know, I don't want to do this from the flesh at any point, right? I mean, you can know the scripture, and you can pound your fist in the flesh and be biblically correct, but be spiritually verbose.
Right.
Right? I mean, understand that. The Pharisees were biblically correct, or law correct, right? Mm-hmm. They were correct in a lot of those things. Now they had added to, right? And we can get into that in a whole other conversation. But the problem is they weren't spiritually correct.
Right.
And so, you know, again, not promoting in any way. This is all God's power and strength in me, not my own. But I think I've been able to avoid a lot of those struggles because, you know, I denied myself from the very beginning and never allowed it to be about me. Now I'll dress goofy and you know, and I don't do that to make a show. I don't do that to make a statement. I do it because I like it. You know, I had a crazy shirt on Sunday, and you know, I like what I think are cool clothes. A lot of people tell me they're really not that cool, Jay. But whatever. If I like it, I'm gonna wear it. I'm not worried about opinions on that.
I was in the office the other day at Winfield, dropping some stuff off for Susan, and I saw some of your clothes that were laying on the chair, and I thought, good Lord, what is that? And it's like, but I watch you and I'm thinking, oh man, I can never compete. There's no way.
It's no competition.
One thing that, now what was it one time?
And that's a problem. There's a lot of people out there competing.
Yeah.
Right? My only competition is Satan.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm going to take it to him every day. I'm going to take it to him every day, right?
Yeah.
Because he's the only one. Amen. I'm focused on Jesus.
Yeah.
And because I'm focused on Jesus, I want to rip him out of everybody I can.
Yeah.
And
that's good. The didn't you preach one time where you were, it was like right after I think you were called to preach, and you tried to hide in the back. And you weren't even dressed for preach. I mean, how were you dressed that day?
I was in a pair of blue jeans, holy blue jeans. I'd been cutting grass and brush and everything all day. And a speaker that I really wanted to hear was at a church it was Rock Branch Community Church is where it was. And it was David Cook was coming to preach. And man, I mean, it's just a walking Bible. If you ever listened to David Cook preach, I mean, he could just quote whole chapters in under the anointing and just bring the fire. And so I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to go hear him, and it was real close to the house. So I'd been working all day. I was hot and sweaty, and I looked down and saw what time it was, and I was like, shoot, I lost track of time. So I literally ran in the house, quick shower, jumped out, threw the first thing I saw on, which was a pair of jeans that had big old hole in the knees and everything, and so forth. And I just grabbed a Harley T-shirt because I own a smorgasbord of Harley T-shirts at the time, and I just grabbed the top Harley T-shirt I could find, which was the Myrtle Beach
Harley shirt.
Yeah, I have a
Bike
collection.
week.
Everywhere we'd go, I'd have to find a Harley shop and get a T-shirt. I don't do that anymore. They're way too expensive, and I'm cheap. But so I threw that Harley shirt on, and I didn't even grab my Bible. Because with David, I knew I didn't need it. He was going to quote the whole scripture. So I just jumped in the car and flew out the door and went. And actually, I flew out the door, then jumped in the car. But
it's always works better that way.
It does work a whole lot better that way. And I got there, and I just, service had already started, and the choirs were up there singing, and I just slid into the back row and sat down there, and and as I get there, I'm kind of sitting back there in the back, and I'm looking around. I don't see David anywhere. And so long story short,
good crowd there.
Oh, full. I mean, David always packed the place, and people would come from 3 or 4 counties to come wherever he was preaching, and so I slid into the back, noticed David wasn't there, and Delbert, their pastor, called for all the ministers to come to the front. And God will tell us who's going to speak tonight's message. And so I'm like, nope, not this guy. I'm just going to sit right here. Everybody else can figure that out. Well, God had already started speaking in my heart that it was me. Right. And I'm like, nope. I said, so-and-so's here, so-and-so's there. They're the most big filling people in the world. They're going to say it's them, and they're going to get up there and do it, and I've wasted my time coming. So I'm kind of sitting there processing all of this in my head, thinking I'm not going up there, and they had already gotten up there, and everyone's straightening their tie and looking just right, and everything else like that. And Delbert's just a wonderful human being, and Delbert says, "Didn't I see Brother J. Mace come in?" I'm like, "Dang, quiet." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" And so I just kind of lifted. He said, "Come on up here, Brother J." I'm like, "Dang." On it. and so I go up and I join the prayer, and I knew that it was me. And here I am, Harley T-shirt, holy blue jeans. Not that there's anything sacrilegious about Harley Davidsons. I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea of what I'm saying. But it just, I didn't look the part, because back then it was suit and tie, the whole bit, right? And so forth. And so like right before we prayed, Delbert winks at me. So Delbert knows too. God's already talking to Delbert.
Right.
So I'm just like, come on, are you kidding me? And
funny.
so the whole time we're praying, God's telling me when I'm going to preach. I'm not even praying.
But you didn't get this at the house.
I didn't get this at the house.
Yeah,
I had no
just not
idea.
till
I
you
was
got
focused on my work. And so the whole time I'm preaching, God's telling me when I'm going to pray, or praying, God's telling me when I'm going to preach. I'm not even praying at this point.
Right.
Because I'm listening.
You're not even spiritual to
I'm
yourself.
downloading from God
Right.
what he wants me to do.
Right.
And I'm still thinking to myself, nah, so-and-so's going to say it's him. This is a great opportunity for him. He's going to jump all over that. And so forth. And the prayer ends, and Delbert looks right at me. God say anything to anybody?
Looking right at you.
Looking right at me. And so that made everyone else look at me. and I'm just like, yeah, it's
me.
It's me. And, I saw those other guys snarl up their nose, and everything else.
And I
so
bet you
Delbert
they still do.
So Delbert says, you know what? We're going to sing a couple congregational songs, get Jay an opportunity to get himself ready, and we'll hear what God has. And he put his arm around me. He says, Brother Jay, if you walk right through there, you'll find, I don't know if he said it was his office, but a room or something. You'll find Bibles and everything in there. He said, just when you're ready, come on out, and we'll get started. And I'm like, okay.
Preached heaven down, did you?
And man,
powerful.
Altars were full.
Yeah.
It's just amazing what God will do when you're not the point, and you're not the reason, and you're not the spotlight. And that was a spiritual Kodak moment for me.
Yeah.
Suit and tie didn't mean crap. Didn't mean anything.
I think you started this whole trend around the world.
So,
that was you who did it.
Yeah. So I've just never been that person. I wore I've worn Steeler jerseys in the pulpit before, because I'm just going to throw that on and go. And people snarl their nose up, but
that's all.
It is what it is.
Before we get into John chapter 6, I got to tell you a quick story. So, this moped binge that I've been on, to buy a moped, and it's not one of those little dorky looking mopeds that people. It's nice. It's got fancy stuff on it. And I think it's going to be fun. So I had lunch with a buddy of mine the other day who has a couple of motorcycles, and I know nothing about this stuff. I'm learning. Airplanes and cars I'm good with, but I don't know nothing about motorcycles. And if my mom was alive today, she would be all over me about it. So, but anyway, so I thought, I got to have a helmet, So my buddy, I said, man, where can I get a helmet? He said, well, there's a Harley Davidson place down, in Spring Hill, South Charleston. Let's go down there. So we went down there. And so you walk in, some of the nicest guys down there. I mean, some of the nicest guys.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But, I walk in, and so so I go in, I say, and here's how I said it. I said, I need a helmet for my bike. And if you notice, I didn't say my motorcycle.
Snorting over here, Lord.
I put the camera on you. Stay on there. So I said, I need a camera. I need a helmet for my bike. And so I made sure I didn't say my moped. And so
you're killing me.
I'm so trying to figure it out. And so I said, I just need a helmet. So they take me back into the helmets and this kind of stuff. So then these guys are talking to me after, I pick up the helmet, and I got a nice helmet. It's going to be cool. And so what kind of bike do you have? And it's like, man, I don't want to talk about this, And so I told him, I said, I have a hangar that has an airplane in it in Gasaway, West Virginia. And I said, I need a vehicle so I can drive back and forth to the church that I pastor. I thought I'd throw that in, and I said, so I just bought just one of those. I showed him the picture. He said, well, that looks nice. He says, whenever you're ready to upgrade, and I'm thinking, I'm in a Harley place buying a helmet for a moped.
Oh my gosh.
I felt like, it's like, this is so wrong. But I thought of that when you said Harley, but they were very nice and very respectful.
Hey, I'll tell you what, biker guys are some of the best dudes on the face of the earth. My only advice is just don't be stupid.
No,
they're gonna treat you with respect, and they're gonna protect you.
Yeah,
and I mean, there's a few bad seeds out there, as there is
everywhere
with anything. But there's bad seeds in the church. But biker guys are great.
So they ended up, just one quick thing, and then we get back into it. So they invited us, me and my buddy, to this luncheon, this dinner that they do.
For my bike.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm still dying.
so he said, well, we're having a dinner tomorrow night, up in Canal City, and won't you guys show up? And I told James, I said, I'm not going to that dinner. And he said, why? And I said, I have a moped. I said, I'm not going to go in there like I'm some good biker, guy. But anyway, I thought you would like that story.
That's hilarious. I'm dying.
70 miles to the gallon.
You can't beat it. I've had the same thoughts before. I've just not pulled the trigger. But
you better be careful. I may buy you one. I may buy you one, and you and I go down to Harley and get you a helmet.
Get our chaps on.
That's
go
so
for
funny.
A Sunday drive.
That's a hoot with our wives on the back. That's so funny. So, what's your take on John? If we can ever get this back, John chapter 6, because this is where you were preaching, starting at verse 22. What's Jesus saying in here to the people that you brought out in the sermon?
A lot, but I think his main point, and I have, I've doubled down on this a lot this week in conversations and in some different posts. But there's one point in this when the Jews were very, and he's addressing the Jews here. He's not addressing the religious rulers or anyone else. He's addressing the crowd, and he's addressing Jews. And he even, John's very articulate to say, that the Jews asked this, and he said this to the Jews, and very pointed that he's addressing the Jews. And something that you find about the Jewish religion is they're very traditional and they're very orthodox in remembering all of the things where God moved. Whether it was, Passover because of, that led to the Exodus out of Egypt, whether it was, the manna in the desert, all of these great moves of God that had gotten them to life. And even though they were whining and crying and murmuring in the desert, the generations after that, all they remember is the story. They don't remember the whining and crying and complaining that kept that generation from coming into the promised land. All they remember is the stories they were told that God fed us every day. God fed us manna and everything else. But those same people, even though God was feeding them manna, were not allowed into the promised land because of their flesh, because of their mindset, because of their attitudes, and because of their lack of vision, right? Their lack of spiritual vision. And Jesus really cranks down on them here and says to you, your fathers ate manna in the desert and are dead, right? And if you think about how Jews processed God at that time and in their life and in their ways, processed God, it was more ritualistic than it was what we know as church in any form, right? It was very ritualistic. It was very much this happened, and we're giving God thanks for it. We're having a feast to give God thanks for it. We're doing all of these things. I'm not belittling that. I have some great Jewish friends, and I respect wholeheartedly their their passion to do these things. And they're good people. They're not the complainers and murmurers, but Jesus is really creating a landmark here, because all of these people were fed. Remember, we just came out of John chapter 5 where he fed the thousands, right? And, and understand that the church board told him he couldn't do it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Church board said, nope, send him home. We don't have enough. We're shutting this down. And Jesus says, you know what? You embarrass me. I'm going to go talk to this kid.
Right.
because this kid brought a lunch and he believes I can do something with it. I'm going to go talk to him and ignore you guys, right?
Right.
And so, I just kind of have this scene, kind of like a John Wayne moment with Jesus. The disciples are there telling Jesus what he can and can't do.
Right.
And Jesus is just like, move, just get out of my way. Hey, kid, come here. Bring
Right.
me your lunch and let's see what we can do together with it.
That's
And, and he feeds all of these people to excess. The Bible says
Leftovers.
they were full. They were filled, right? They had everything that they wanted to where they couldn't eat anymore. And some of these people hadn't probably eaten in days,
Wow.
right? And he fills them to excess with leftovers, right?
Yeah.
And so forth. And so he gets away, right? And just being long story short, he moves himself away because he knew that they were going to come after him. And the people follow him. The people get up the next day, see that he's gone, and so they jump in their boats and pursue him, right?
Looking for him.
And so now we have this moment, we have this scene where, they're asking him, who he is, and they're wanting more from him. And he says to them, look, you're following me because I fed you.
Yeah.
Right? You're following because you ate of the bread.
All right.
But here's the declaration that he makes that I think if we don't take anything else away from this message or this chapter, is he said, sooner or later you're going to have to eat of me.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to eat my flesh. And you're going to have to drink my blood.
Yeah.
Right? And it says, they're kind of like, what? Kind of like a Nicodemus moment. It's like, what do you mean born again? Right? They're kind of in that moment, as you read down through this, and he says, what do you mean? That we have to eat of your flesh. Right? They couldn't comprehend the I am the bread of life statement. And they're attacking that idea and ultimately him in every way. Is this not Jesus that was born of Joseph and Mary? He's certainly not the bread of life. He's certainly not worthy of that, and so they're attacking him personally, right? And one thing we need to understand, I was in debate for years and won a lot of competitions with it and everything. And one of the number one rules of debate is don't attack your opponent. When you make it personal,
you say you
make your argument weak. Right? Set down your facts and stand on your facts. And illustrate your facts well. Right? But when you start attacking the person, you've already weakened your argument. And so here's what they're doing. They don't understand it. So what do? They start attacking Jesus. They start attacking where he came from. They start attacking who they believe he is rather than listening to what God is saying he is.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And so Jesus comes back to them and they have this moment where Jesus says, your fathers ate manna in the desert.
All right.
Right? Now he is attacking, not them. He's not making it personal. He's showing them that this thing that they hold, starting at verse 49, 48, he says, I am the bread of life. He's reiterating. He's doubling down, knowing that they're arguing amongst themselves about it, knowing they're pointing fingers at him, knowing that they're attacking him, tearing him down. He doubles down and says, I am the bread of life. And now he's giving them the shock moment to help them grasp it. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness and are dead.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. That's pretty blunt.
I think I said in the middle of the message, Jesus ain't playing no more, y'all.
No.
He's getting ready to lay down his life for you.
Yeah.
And he's making sure you get it.
Right.
He's making sure that the customs and the rituals and the feasts and all of these things, right, that you celebrate. And no one's arguing that you shouldn't celebrate those things, right? Just like I was celebrating spiritual Kodak moments in my life, there are things that we should celebrate that God moved on us with. So he's not taking that away from you. He's not taking that memory or tradition away from you. But what he's saying is you've got to move past it.
Yes.
And realize that your spiritual existence is not and will never be rooted in that thing.
Yes.
Right? Your fathers ate manna in the desert and are dead.
Right.
Maybe I know the end of the story, so it's easier for me to take the gut punch on that. But man, that was a gut punch from Jesus.
Yes.
Right? He is punching them all in the gut and saying, I am what you should seek. And he goes on to say in verse 53, verily, truly, I'm in the NIV. I don't know how Bible Gateway got me in the NIV, and I don't like it. But I'm not against translations, but I despise the NIV. Thank you very much. But verse 53 says, verily, truly, I tell you, unless you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, you have no life. Right? And I think what Jesus is saying to all of us there, and there's a lot of stuff here. I mean, there's a lot of things we covered. There was even a lot of things when I was outlining the message that I was just like, okay, I can't go down that rabbit hole. I can't go down that rabbit hole. I can't go down that rabbit hole. These are my 3 points, and this is where I'm staying. But he is telling us that who he is and what he is and what he does and how he examples all of us, or examples all of it to us, is meat for us. It is the bread of life for us. Right? So every teaching, the things written aforetime were written for our learning, not necessarily our doing, right? Some of the things, yes, some of the things, no. But all of the things written aforetime were written for our learning. Jesus is saying to us that we should be eating of his example. Why? Because he is the culmination of all of the things that were and all of the things that are to come. He is the Alpha, he is the Omega, he's the beginning, he's the end. He is the all in all. Yes. And if there is something that we need to eat of and drink of and make our life attuned to, it's him.
Yes.
And only him. Because everything else, even good stuff, everything else we can eat from and die. But if we eat of him, if we make him our presence and we make him our existence and we make him our motivation,
yes,
then we have life.
Let me ask you a question. One of the things that I've seen, I preached this message last week about you'll never thirst again. Okay, he said, if you drink of this water, you'll never thirst again. He said, inside of you, there will be a spring of living water and a well. Okay, that's what's inside of us.
Yep.
Okay. Well, now I'm on a quest here on verse 35 of John chapter 6. He says, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger. Okay, and the other scripture I read, he said, you'll never thirst. Now he's saying, you'll never hunger.
Mm-hmm.
And he that believeth on me shall never thirst. And it just, I'm sitting here reading this while you're talking, and I'm thinking, wow, that just is part 2 of the message that I preached last week.
Yeah.
But if he says that you'll never thirst again if you drink from me, and he's saying that he's the bread of life, and if you, he says that I am the bread of life, and he that cometh to me shall never hunger. So what seems to be the problem? Why are people starving to death spiritually, and why are people dehydrated spiritually when there's no reason for it?
Well, and Jesus was one of the greatest ever at object lessons.
Yeah.
You know, the woman at the well, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The woman at the well had come to fill her pots.
Yes.
And take back into town. And we know her story. She was dried up, man. She had no emotion left. She had no love left, right? She was just going through the motions, trying to get from place to place and thing to thing.
All right.
And
that's really not what's on there.
Okay, good, because you're kind of freaking me out.
No, you're good.
There's like so many things going on here.
No, you're good.
Everyone else at home is like, what are they doing? But
no, you're
there's
fine.
Like all kinds of things happening around us. You know, and so Jesus used that to illustrate to her, look, you're dry. And I know you're dry.
Right.
And what I'm offering you is more than a drink, right? Because you're thirsty for more.
Yes.
Than just some water. You're thirsty for fulfillment. You're thirsty for meaning. You're thirsty for desire. You're thirsty for life again.
Yes.
Right? And I can spring up inside of you.
Right.
And provide all of that for you. Right?
Yes.
She wasn't looking for bread. She wasn't looking for sustenance. She wasn't looking for money. She wasn't looking at anything. She was looking for meaning.
Right.
Because her meaning had been taken from her again and again and again and again.
Right.
To now where she had no meaning, so she was just being used and abused, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And so now Jesus was saying to her, I can bring all of that back. And not just bring it back, but I can make it overflow from you. And I love how The Chosen depicts her, right? Because like when they start going into town and everything else, and everyone's like, yeah, I know, we've heard, right? Come see a man that told me everything I ever did, right?
Yeah.
Because what? She's overflowing, right? She's overflowing Jesus, right? And I think that was his invitation. It's his invitation to her, but ultimately his invitation to us.
Yes.
Right? I can overflow in your life. It's the same thing here in John chapter 6, where he's saying to them, look, eat of me, watch me.
Right.
Watch me. See how I live. See how I do it. I'm doing it the same way you were called to doing it. You've just screwed it up for all of these years, right? You've allowed religious leaders to make a mockery of what God truly intended, right? So I'm here to tell you, eat of me.
Right.
Live like me. And it's the crux of this whole series, really. Jesus together. And the reason we don't get church, and the reason we don't really operate as a church together on the level that we're called to, is because we don't really get Jesus. Right? And so that's the whole point of this Jesus together ideal. I mean, I don't even think it's a sermon series. It's more of an ideal, and it's more something that for this year, I wanted our church to be focused on, right? Because I want you to be focused on the life of Christ, because that's what we need to be eating of, right? You know, and not that I'm discounting Paul, and not that I'm discounting John, and not that I'm discounting Peter, and I'm not discounting any of the epistles or Romans and Hebrews and all of those things. I'm not discounting any of the New Testament when I say this. But when we read those things, we have to read those things understanding that the men writing them were eating of Jesus's flesh and drinking of Jesus's blood.
Right.
If we don't get that, we don't understand
right.
what they're telling us to do and how they're telling us to live, because it's all a culmination of what they experienced.
Right.
Eating and drinking Jesus Christ.
And I don't think that the scripture, and I think you'll agree with me here, he's not talking fleshly here in this verse.
No,
you know, he says, I am the bread of life, and he that cometh to me shall not hunger. but shall believe and shall never thirst. He throws that thirst back in there again.
Mm-hmm.
But then he says, I was talking about, so if I read that one verse right there that backs up what your sermon is saying, that right there tells me that I'm going to be spiritually fed, and I'm going to drink from him, and I'm going to eat from him, and then that will put my spiritual diet, so to speak, in balance.
And I'm not going to be consumed with the past. I'm not going to be consumed with the future. I'm going to be content in the right now because I'm full.
Yes.
Right? And I'm full of the right things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Which means my heart, my emotions, my mindset is all where it should be and on the right things.
That's so good. Man, I tell you, I get so many sermon ideas from you. Thank you.
Well, that doesn't mean it's me. It means it's biblical.
I know.
I hope it's biblical, of course.
I know. So, so what's give us a little tease on what Sunday's about.
Sunday is the next step. We'll step into John chapter 7 on Sunday, and we're just going to keep walking through the book of John until Jesus says, "Nope, I'm done here," and move on. Because again, I think this whole Jesus together thing is I just listened to people, and then this isn't an insult to anyone. I just listened to people, and I had this realization one day through a very ugly course of events, and I'm like, man, we're not getting Jesus.
Right.
We're not getting Jesus right. Right? We can Bible thump all day long, but we're not getting Jesus right. And that's what really drove us to this series and this idea that Jesus matters, not just because of the cross,
right,
not just because of his death, and not just because of his resurrection, but because of his life.
Right.
His life is the culmination of everything that happened and everything that will happen.
Right.
And how we're to live in it and how we're to live through it.
That's so good.
And if we don't get Jesus right, we can't get any of it right.
Right.
And so the whole idea of this series is to get us to Acts chapter 2.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember, the first sermon of the series was Acts chapter 2.
Right.
And I told him, we're never going to get there together.
Yeah.
If we don't get Jesus right.
Yeah.
And so we have to get Jesus right. Everything else, I said this in one of my sermons, is everything else is minutia.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's everything else is truly meaningless if we don't get Jesus right.
Right.
And so that's our point. So we're going to keep walking through John. We're going to keep looking at the life of Jesus and making that the point.
I like that what you said was we don't get to Pentecost individually. No, it's like we can't do life our way. And I love that.
Got to persecute the flesh.
I'm a fan, man. God's using you in this series, and I just absolutely love it. And God's doing some faithful things. When you started the Winfield campus, one of the things that you always...
I didn't start that. I was against it. that was a God thing.
It is a God thing. When you came on board, should I say, one of the things that you concentrate on big is the kids.
Yes.
Kids and family.
Yeah.
And so...
and that's biblical too. It goes back to Jesus on the shore.
Yeah.
With Peter. Peter, do you love me?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And yea, Lord, you know that I do. Feed my lambs.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did go on to say, feed my sheep. But the first thing out of Jesus' lips were, feed my lambs.
Yes.
And if we're not starting with our kids, man.
Yeah.
If the kids aren't the focus, and if they're not the main point, then every point after that is meaningless.
Yeah.
And so
it's about the kids.
And we're thankful to have a lot. We have a lot of kids. And man, it just, it's why we cheer them on every Sunday when we dismiss Gospel Quest and everything else, because it matters. It matters. Sorry.
No. So
I know you're trying to wrap up.
No, I was getting to where what's going on this weekend as in a way of with church and Gospel Quest and youth. You have youth meetings.
Mm-hmm. Youth 5 to 7 on Sunday evenings at the church.
5 to 7 Eastern Standard Time on Sunday evenings.
Middle school, high school, we'd love to have you. Doesn't matter what church you go to. If you have a desire, if your kid has a desire to be under the fervor of the Lord, then they're welcome there.
Tell us a little bit about the food bank.
Food bank. Bob and Elaine Fridley and Melissa Smith help them. Just a wonderful thing. Elaine came to me and she's like, "I want a food bank." I'm like, "Okay, do it." Which it's kind of my answer to everything, and so forth. And so they're open the second and fourth Tuesday of every month, and they accept donations from the church, from the community. I mean, we had a guy show up a couple Saturdays ago and just drop off $300 worth of food.
Wow.
And everything else for them to put it in there. We're working right now. If you've seen the cheerleading camp that the Little League cheerleaders in Winfield are putting on, they're doing that, and they're doing a food drive as part of that, and all of that's getting donated to the church. The Midget League football in Winfield does a can drive. That's going to be donated back to the church. And so it's something that has reached the community, and something that the community is involved in. And that's what's the most exciting thing about it is, yes, the church is doing a lot, and Elaine and Bob work tirelessly to make it everything that it's become. And it's because of them and their heart and their vision for it that it's been successful. But we feed anywhere from, or I don't say we feed, we provide food for anywhere from 8 to I think as many as 17, 18 at some of those Tuesday offerings. They're literally sometimes the church provides money every month for that, in addition to what the community and the congregants bring in to that, just to make sure that they always have something. And, between the church and individuals in the community, man, we're touching lives. We're feeding people that otherwise aren't being fed, and trying to embody what chapter 6 is telling us here, and to live a life of Christ. Don't send them home, man. Feed them. The church board said send them home, and Jesus said nope, not gonna. Yeah. And he fed them. So and again, all of that is Bob and Elaine and Melissa. They do all of the work. My hands are rarely in it, and just proud of them and everything that God's doing through them in it.
It's an awesome thing to be a part. What I had this idea while we were talking here. I wanted to promote this because this is part of you too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you have, and that's so small. Let me hold on a minute. Let me make it a little bit bigger on my page here so I could see. Okay, so coming up tomorrow night, this is in West Virginia, April the 22nd at 6 p.m. at Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, which is in Elkview, West Virginia. The SGMA of West Virginia is going to induct several people into a ceremony and a concert. The Guardians are phenomenal. I know them. They're really good people. But you have Jack Cart. You have also Debbie and Tony Petrie that are coming into the Hall of Fame. People that we know. Clarence Moore. Also Tom Parsons, is coming in. So that's Squires.
J.D. Kuntz too, right? Isn't J.D. getting in?
J.D., J.T. Kuntz is coming in. And Scott Brooks, I don't know Scott. Dean Hickman, I don't know who Dean Hickman is. But some of these people that I know. So we want to encourage you to be a part of this. If you want to go, it's free admission. All the sponsors are on there as well. And I just thought, because Pastor Jay and I are affiliated with Debbie and Tony Petrie, as well as Jack Cart and several of them who were with the Lordsman over the years. So I'm proud of them, and I think it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. No one deserves it more.
Yeah.
the Petries and the Carts have worked really hard for years, ministering in revivals and church services, all over the country, or at least the eastern side of the U.S. And just done a phenomenal job and have the best hearts.
Yeah.
And everything, and endured a lot, and endured a
whole
lot. And I don't think there's anyone more deserving than those guys. And
so I'm gonna try to go to that tomorrow night.
Yeah. I wish I had known sooner, or I would have liked to have been there, but I'm committed.
So I do want
to thank you, give him my love and kiss on the cheek from me. I want to tell everyone that's watching to save the date for August 18th. That's a Friday evening, Saturday the 19th, and Sunday morning the 20th. The Pulse-Winfield will be hosting our first conference. Can't give all of the details yet. We'll have an event page, and we'll have everything set up for that very soon. But it's for everyone. It's it's relational it's going to be relational in every way, as far as our earthly relationships are concerned, whether that be in marriage, whether that be in dating, whether that be, just in our relationships, like mine and yours. It can be applied to all of that. And it's all rooted and founded in what God is doing. So we're super excited about that, and to have the opportunity of it. It was born out of the Ignite conference that we just attended, and it was a session that you and I, John, went to, and I was just blown away.
Very good one.
By that presentation, and so we've been pursuing this, and finally able to dot the I's and cross the T's this week, and to get it scheduled. So.
And you and I weren't going to that one. You were headed one place, I was headed another. And then I saw you going in there, and I thought, well, I'll just go with him. So, and it's like, we could have missed that.
Yeah.
And man, I'm so glad we were there.
Oh man, me too.
Because it was just an awesome thing.
Me too. It was a God thing.
No doubt about it. Well, let me tell you something. Being a part of this ministry, God is faithful, and we're so thankful for you partnering with us. You can text the word PULSE to 1-304-244-3187, or you can go to our website, thepulsewv.com, thepulsechurch.com, and give through PayPal, or mail your love gift to P.O. Box 561 Eleanor, Eleanor, West Virginia 25070. So we pray you have a great day. Thanks for joining us for the Pulse WV Live. Come on, Pastor Jam, we'll show you my bike. Have a great day, everybody.